Jon Meacham, And There Was Light, Abraham Lincoln and the American Struggle. Embark on a journey through the life and struggles of one of America's greatest leaders, Abraham Lincoln, in Jon Meacham's And There Was Light. This book's summary delves deep into Lincoln's humble beginnings, his voracious appetite for learning, and his rise to prominence in the world of politics. Discover how Lincoln's personal experiences shaped his ardent fight for emancipation and the reunification of a nation divided. Explore the enduring legacy of a man who transformed history and let his compassionate spirit shine through with every challenge he faced.
Lincoln's humble beginnings. Abraham Lincoln, despite being a renowned orator, rarely spoke about his background due to its humble nature. Born in rural Kentucky, he experienced a difficult childhood with a family shrouded in rumors and an illiterate father. Lincoln's challenging upbringing included working as a young laborer and losing his mother at a young age. His access to limited education helped him develop an insatiable curiosity and love for reading, which contributed to his intellectual and moral foundation. Furthermore, his exposure to anti-slavery sentiments through Baptist church connections likely influenced his later abolitionist stance. Abraham Lincoln, celebrated for his eloquence, was notably reserved when discussing his humble origins. Hailing from rural Kentucky, he experienced a childhood fraught with hardship, including a family mired in scandalous rumors and an uneducated, illiterate father. This difficult upbringing included subsisting in poverty, losing his mother at a tender age, and working for neighbors as his father claimed his wages. In fact, his experiences as a laborer perhaps intensified his distaste for slavery, as he would later liken himself to a slave. Despite the struggles, Lincoln managed to receive a modest formal education, amounting to less than a year. Although brief, this schooling period vastly impacted his life as he acquired the gift of writing. Lincoln's passion for learning led him to write on any surface he could find, using charcoal on dust, sand, and snow. This natural curiosity manifested into hours spent devouring books, which allowed him to escape his difficulties and shape his intellectual and moral values. In addition to his love for learning, young Lincoln's exposure to Baptist religious teachings also played an essential role in developing his principles. Growing up around Baptist churches, he became well acquainted with the prevalent anti-slavery stance and frequent discussions on abolition. The Lincoln family also belonged to the Baptist Licking Locust Association Friends of Humanity, known as an Emancipation Association. These surroundings contributed greatly to Lincoln's enduring opposition to slavery and later political beliefs, which suggest that his claim of being naturally anti-slavery was not merely a political embellishment. Lincoln's pursuit of greatness. Growing up in a politically engaged America, young Abraham Lincoln aspired to prove himself and overcome the constraints of his background. His journey began in New Salem, Illinois, where he was captivated by the power of courtroom lawyers' rhetoric. Already aware of his persuasive voice, Lincoln ran for the Illinois legislature in 1832 but faced defeat. Despite this setback, he remained involved in local politics as a postmaster and honed his intellect through literary pursuits. Lincoln's political ambitions were tempered by pragmatism, as evident when a friend destroyed an essay he wrote critiquing Christianity, shielding him from controversy. Lincoln's early life illustrates his resilience, curiosity, and the careful balance between his personal convictions and public persona. Lincoln's scorpion sting strategy. Slavery was inevitably entwined in Lincoln's political career. As a Whig Party member, he believed that only states had the power to abolish slavery, not the federal government. His scorpion sting strategy envisioned surrounding the South with free states, eventually forcing the metaphorical scorpion to sting itself, ending slavery through gradual, cultural change. To compromise with slave owners, Lincoln even proposed a resolution of gradual abolition in the District of Columbia, but it failed to impress both abolitionists and pro-slavery supporters. Despite the growing divide, Lincoln continued to advocate for compromise and compensation, seeking a middle ground in the contentious battle against slavery. Lincoln's path to abolition. Abraham Lincoln's gradual opposition to slavery didn't prevent him from openly denouncing it, as evidenced in his condemnation of the Kansas-Nebraska Act and his participation in the Republican Party's formation. After losing his Senate race against Stephen Douglas, but impressing the public with his debates, Lincoln was chosen as the Republican nominee for the 1860 presidential election. Upon winning, he received support from abolitionist Frederick Douglass, who noted that Lincoln's election weakened the dominating slave oligarchy. However, the transition to power was fraught with tension, as Southern states began seceding from the Union, eventually forming the Confederate States of America in 1861. Lincoln's unwavering stand. Frederick Douglass was unsure if President Lincoln would seek a compromise with the Confederate States. However, Lincoln firmly upheld the Union and the Constitution and refused to surrender the founding fathers' work. In response, the Confederates attacked Fort Sumter in South Carolina, marking the start of the war. As the war raged on, Lincoln also faced personal tragedy when his son, Willie, died of typhoid fever. In his grief, he sought solace in religion, reflecting on God's will and the idea of divine providence. This deepened perspective reshaped Lincoln's understanding of the world and guided his future decisions. Despite speculations that Abraham Lincoln might compromise with the secessionist Confederate States, he held steadfast to the principles of the Union and the Constitution. Following his electoral victory, Lincoln asserted his commitment to preserving the nation's foundation, unwilling to yield to Southern pressure. As the Confederate forces initiated violent conflict at Fort Sumter, Lincoln vowed to retaliate with equal strength, having exhausted all peaceful means. Simultaneously navigating the devastation of the Civil War, Lincoln faced the heartache of losing his 11-year-old son, Willie, to typhoid fever. This personal tragedy led the president to introspect, seeking comfort and understanding in religious teachings. He contemplated the concept of God's providence, pondering whether divine intervention directed the conflict's course. Lincoln's newfound perspective shaped his worldview and significantly influenced his decision-making process during his tenure in office. Lincoln's emancipation struggle. Lincoln himself was cautious and exercised prudence in the matter of slavery, focusing on his political standing and ensuring that any bold moves wouldn't push away his supporters. In 1862, when the Union's war efforts were faltering, Lincoln dared to consider full emancipation, hoping to garner support from Black Americans. Drafting the first version of the Emancipation Proclamation in the summer, he waited for months, balancing the potential consequences. When the Union won a key battle in Antietam, he took it as a divine sign to move forward with emancipation. Acting on this conviction, he signed the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1, 1863, which not only declared slaves in Confederate states as free but also allowed for the recruitment and arming of black men. This monumental act transformed the war into a struggle for the enslaved, with Lincoln aware of its historical significance. Triumph and tragedy in 1865. On April 10, 1865, the Union had finally triumphed in the American Civil War. The tide of the conflict had shifted in favor of the Union after emancipation, as they held superior numbers and resources. Meanwhile, Confederate forces lost territories and failed to gain support from enslaved populations. About a week prior to the Union's victory, they closed in on the Confederate capital of Richmond, Virginia. Confederate General Lee informed President Davis that they could no longer hold their position in Appomattox, Virginia. As the capital fell, residents prepared for the aftermath and chaos ensued. President Lincoln toured the fallen capital to offer the enslaved a message of hope and encouragement, emphasizing that their newfound liberty came from God. However, tragedy would soon strike as the nation began the process of reunification. Assassination's impact on equality. John Wilkes Booth, a white supremacist and Confederate sympathizer, ultimately allowed his profound hatred for President Lincoln to manifest in a deadly act of violence on April 14, 1865. Booth's assassination of Lincoln at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C., during a showing of Our American Cousin, marked the end of Lincoln's life but not the end of Booth's influence. When Andrew Johnson, a politician chosen for Lincoln's second term as VP to appease white, anti-black Northerners, stepped up as the new president, he actively worked against racial progress. By undermining the rights of Black Americans, he paved the way for the continuation of white supremacy through Jim Crow laws, segregation, and lynching.
In And There Was Light, Jon Meacham paints a vivid portrait of Abraham Lincoln as a passionate advocate for human rights and freedom. Lincoln's journey from an unassuming background to the heights of the American presidency is a testament to his perseverance, intelligence, and moral compass. His unwavering commitment to abolishing slavery, despite the numerous obstacles he encountered, altered the course of American history. Though his life tragically ended with his assassination, Lincoln's enduring impact on civil rights and the aspiration for a more equitable society resoundingly remains. Through this insightful book summary, we come to appreciate a man whose shining light continues to inspire us to this day.